Story about one of the icons of NASCAR, Dale Earnhardt.
He was one of the greatest drivers in the history of American motorsport.
Second wasn't an option. You know, he raced to beat you.
Remember one thing, when he first started, his car was pink.
Pink?
Do either of you have any idea where this car is today?
Gosh, no,
I've got a case in the world of NASCAR, which is pretty cool. The one guy that, of course, stood out for me would be Dale Earnhardt.
Oh, of course.
You look at sort of the greats at each sport. He's the one that brought NASCAR to the masses.
Oh, yeah.
And the Intimidator, right? That's what they called him.
Didn't he wear, like, all black?
All black, yeah. I mean, he started his career in the early 70s racing dirt tracks in North Carolina.
I didn't know that.
His first race car was actually a sort of Pepto-Bismol pink car.
Wait, a pink car?
A pink car.
The Intimidator driving a pink race car. Takes a real man to do that.
But what's interesting is nobody knows what happened to that car or where it is today.
Really?
And only 2 photos of that car even exist. I'm gonna try to dig in and see if we can figure it out.
Can't miss a pink car, right? Here's to racing.
Yes.
Earnhardt showing his muscle now.
Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500.
Will there ever be another race driver like Dale Earnhardt? Oh, he was one of the greatest drivers in the history of American motorsports, not just NASCAR. He had one style, and I call it total reckless abandon.
Dale learned from his father, Ralph, who was a very good mechanic. He preferred to work on race cars. Ralph established himself as a very good driver. He won like 5 track championships in one season.
He would be gone some weeks, 5 nights out of 7, racing dirt tracks. That's when Dale started, was at those tracks. And Daddy died in '73, and after that, Dale kind of stepped up, driving on the big tracks, asphalt. It was almost like Daddy was back.
The rough driving style, black car, the Intimidator, kind of a Darth Vader kind of thing. He was the new icon.
He won the NASCAR championship 7 times.
He was bulletproof. He was indestructible. He was going to go all the way, and nothing was going to stop him.
The 43rd annual Daytona 500 is set to get underway. Terry Bradshaw waves the green flag. We're racing.
2001 Daytona 500 was a major turning point for NASCAR. Dale was running up near the front of the pack.
He's down low, and the car makes a turn to the right, up toward the wall. Well, that's where you don't want a car to go.
Inside. Bray Wyatt, inside. Detail. Oh! Big trouble. Big wreck behind. Trade and Earnhardt have crashed together in turns 3 and 4.
Dale Earnhardt, who was widely regarded as the greatest driver in NASCAR history, died Sunday in a crash on the final turn of the final lap of his sport's biggest race, the Daytona 500. This morning, the flag in that famed oval.
He's gone. Conceivably the most popular race driver that ever lived in North America. And we lost him.
Earnhardt's death in 2001, at the age of 49, shook up the racing world and cemented his place among the legends of the sport. His untimely passing continues to be mourned in Kannapolis, North Carolina, the small mill town where Dale grew up. It's here that he got his start on the dirt tracks in 1970 with an unlikely set of wheels, a Pepto-Bismol pink Ford. And though it launched his career, Dale never spoke about it publicly until decades later.
You understand, while I was a little rough and to start with, when I drove a pink car, you had to be a little rough.
When Dale went public about the pink car, racing fans went wild. A die-cast toy was manufactured and sold like hotcakes, but Dale never mentioned what happened to the original. So I'm hoping local residents can give me some clues. And I'm starting with Greg Davold, who built a replica of the pink Ford.
you want to, you can take it for a spin. Just keep pumping that gas.
I love it. It brings you right back. That is awesome. That's something else, man.
That feels pretty good, don't it?
Oh. So this is the same exact color Dale's first race car was, right?
Well, that's kind of what you call pink.
Did you know Dale?
Yeah, I knew him. I'm a 1951 model and born in 51, and he was too.
Did you ever see him race the pink car?
A couple of times, yeah.
In 1970, before Dale was famous, he raced that K2 at the now shuttered Metrolina Fairgrounds, where locals gathered and raced every Friday night. He was the only one with a pink car. You know what happened to the original sort of pink car after Dale was done driving it?
I don't know. Never didn't keep up with it. Back in them days, people was cutting up cars and never did give it a thought about stuff. Never did.
It's a little odd that Greg, who has worked hard preserving the legend of the car, has no clue what happened to the original. Could it be true that the K2 was really cut up and used for scrap metal?
Nobody trades paint like Dale. But remember one thing, when he first started, his car was pink.
Pink?
Pink?
Pink. And he's never gotten over it.
The fact that the man in black started his intimidating career in a little pink car has become part of racing lore. But what happened to that car is a total mystery. So I'm in Kannapolis to talk to Dale's mother and sister and see what they know. So this is where Dale grew up? And Kathy, of course?
I was 5 when we moved up here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dale was born in April. And so April, it was right in the middle of race season.
Oh,
so
wow.
Dale was the only one, when she went to the hospital, Daddy had to miss a race
Yeah.
for Dale to be born. And so it was destined that he be a driver.
That's something.
He was born in him, I think.
Yeah.
From week to week, we racing every Friday and Saturday night.
One night, Ralph was driving in the Super Sport, and David and Dale was both running in the semi-modified, and Kathy was driving in the ladies' race that night. Wow. So I had my husband, a son, a son-in-law, and a daughter all racing the same night.
Wow. How'd that feel?
I didn't even have a nerve pill or nothing.
So tell me about Dale's first race car.
Well, the first race car was, he drove the K2, the pink K2 that was owned by Ray and David Oliver. David and I were married at the time, and he brought home a paint chip. I remember standing out in the front of the house in the driveway, and he used to go, "Oh, the car's pink." It was a pretty race car.
You remember any other pink cars around during that time?
No. No.
Kathy tells me the car always stood out, but aside from the color, it was like most cars in town people drove. It wasn't fancy, it was old, and pieced together with a hodgepodge of parts. Do you know what happened to that pink car?
I don't know if it was even taken to a junkyard as a whole or if it was cut apart.
Back then, was there a particular junkyard or a place where people brought cars when they were done?
I really don't know.
I don't really know.
It was just an old race car back in the day. It wasn't special.
Who knew, right, back
Who
then?
knew? Yeah.
Dale's closest relatives say they don't know what happened to the car, which is a surprise since race cars were so much a part of family life and cars were so often reused. But as it turns out, his former brother-in-law might know. Kathy's ex-husband, David Oliver, owned that Ford with his father back in 1970 when Dale started driving it. So I'm meeting him at the Carolina Speedway, where Dale practically grew up. So tell me about this car. You bought it how many years before Dale started riding it?
About a year.
About a year?
And we had Ralph, Dale's father, build us an engine, a right good motor.
Wow.
The first few races, he was driving like he had driven for several years.
He was a natural.
Natural. He had such a feel for things. It wasn't out of control. He was just like fluid. Second wasn't an option. You know, he raced you. I mean, he raced to beat you.
Oh, yeah.
And all I'd done was give him a start. Just let him drive our car for a little bit to show people what his talent was.
David tells me that after a few months of driving the pink car in local races, Dale was ready to graduate to the big leagues. By 1971, he'd found a sponsor and had given the pink Ford back to David. Within a few years, he'd be famous. So when he stopped racing that car, did you race it again?
No, we took it apart. I don't remember what happened, but my daddy got rid of it. Now, whether, I can't remember where they put it in a junkyard or I don't know what happened to the car, and it was junked.
David says they took it apart, but he also says he isn't sure what happened to it. So which is the truth? And if it was junked, how can it be that David doesn't know where?
How many people can remember their first car when they got done with it? It goes off somewhere and you never see it again.
That's right.
You know? And this same thing with that old race car. It was no good to us anymore. And we disposed of it. Where it went, don't have the least idea.
While I can't imagine junking one of Dale's cars today, back in 1971, David and his father had no idea Dale would become the legend that he is today. And the car itself didn't become recognized until years later.
Who's going to tell me Dale Earnhardt was going to be a 7-time Winston Cup champion? He was just a young man.
If that pink car was found, what do you think it would mean to sort of NASCAR in a racing world?
I don't know. They'd probably want it to go into Hall of Fame over there or something, you know, but it's not going to be found.
David seems adamant that Dale's car is long gone. But because he didn't personally junk it, I'm not giving up the search just yet. And I have a hard time believing that in a small town where Dale's legend still looms large, there isn't someone who knows just a little bit more. I spent the last few days in Kannapolis, North Carolina, a dusty mill town of just 44,000 people, but it feels even smaller. Here, everyone seems to have a personal connection to Dale Earnhardt, but, oddly, no one can tell me exactly what happened to his first car. Some say it was junked, because back when Dale first started racing, the sport was nothing like it is today.
Racing was the only sport born in the South, and in the backwoods South. These Southern boys from the farms and the mills, they came out of World War II, they'd been to Paris, they'd been to Germany, and when they got back, they didn't want to just stay 5 miles from the farm like they had before. So racing was kind of a natural outlet. All the little towns, that's what they did in the summertime, and they raced in these little tracks. And it was the mill workers, their families, their friends, drink that moonshine they made up in the mountains, because dry counties back then, and just have a good time.
When Dale came into the sport around 66, 67, it was not a full-time job for us. It wasn't a lifelong career. We had no expectations of anything ever being any more than that weekend race.
His dad never made a lot of money. There was no money in the sport. The whole mindset of racing has changed. It's a different sport than it was even a generation ago. The Fortune 500 companies started taking a look at NASCAR. And then the TV packages are huge, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew and grew. Dale Earnhardt was one of the first guys to really get involved in that corporate spokesperson kind of deal.
First full race they showed on TV, that's when Dale was Rookie of the Year. At that time, the sport and getting into the media was kind of twofold, and they grew and evolved together. Dale was iconic in molding the business of the sport.
Even though he was finally corporatized, he wanted to keep that reputation as a working man. He was the real thing. His teeth weren't fake, and he didn't have his hair coiffed. He didn't look like Elvis Presley. He's Dale Earnhardt.
Before the sport went corporate, race cars were painted in mom-and-pop shops, or in the case of Dale's pink K2, in a garage owned by two Kannapolis-born brothers, Wayne and Frank Davolt. I want to know exactly how that car ended up that now infamous shade of Pepto-Bismol pink. And I'm hoping they could tell me where the car went if it really was junked.
Wow. Frank's the mechanic? You're the body man?
Body man, used to be.
I hear you are the man that painted Dale Earnhardt's first race car pink. Is that true?
That is true.
Yeah?
It wasn't supposed to be pink.
No
it was supposed to be red. But I added just a little bit of white, and when I dumped that in there, it was just turned pink, so.
They didn't want it repainted, huh? That was it?
Well, we didn't have no money. That's David. and myself and Kathy.
Now, Dale's brother-in-law, David, owned the car.
He owned it.
But he let Dale drive it.
Yeah, and I'm sure Kathy had something to say about that, too, family.
Do either of you have any idea where this car is today?
Gosh, no, I have no idea.
You know, back then, if they got tore up too bad, you just junked it, you know, throwed it away and started, built a new car.
There it is again, that same story that it was junked. The question is, where would it have gone?
In the early 70s, what'd you do with a car when you wanted to get rid of it?
A lot of people kept them. They just sat and filled and growed up around lots of them.
That's something else.
The Davolts are the first to give me this information. Sometimes discarded cars were just left in people's yards rather than torn up or melted down. Is it possible that Dale's pink Ford is sitting in a yard somewhere to this very day? For a town that is centered around the memory of Dale Earnhardt, Kannapolis has a frustrating lack of evidence about what happened to his first car. I've heard that it could be junked and that it might be lying somewhere in someone's backyard, but no one can tell me where. In a last-ditch effort to get answers, I'm calling up Ryan Davolt, who made the replica with his dad Greg and who is a local politician in town.
We started on that car in 1998 and finished it in November of 2000.
Gotcha. And tell me what you know, if you would, about the original car.
So, it's of course Dale's first car, and you know, after he stopped driving it, that car was used in a couple powder puff races, from my understanding, and then just kind of ended up just like any other old race car back then.
Any idea where the parts went?
A lot of old race cars and scrap metal from around town was taken out to a guy's farm right outside of town, you know, at the dump area. And there was old race cars that ended up out there in total, and some of them ended up out there in pieces.
And what's that person's name?
His name is Tony Barnhart. That would be my only guess as where any old race car may have been junked years ago.
So from your understanding, it is very possible it could have ended up at Tony's.
Correct.
Okay. I thank you very much for your time, Ryan. I greatly appreciate it.
Glad to do it. Nice to talk to you.
I'm on my way to Tony Barnhart's house. I hear that Tony's yard was at some point sort of the place where old cars came to die. So there's some hope, at least, that he may know something about the K2 and what happened to it. You know, it's always dicey when you walk up to someone's house cold. You never know how they're going to react, especially in these parts where they're not used to strangers walking up and knocking on their door. There's many times in my career that I have knocked on the door cold as opposed to calling someone. And the reason is it's very difficult for someone to slam a door in a person's face. Not many people can do that. It's very easy to hang up a phone. So if you really want to speak with someone, and it's very important, you want to walk up and knock on their door.
Who is it?
How you doing, sir? My name's Kevin Barrows. I'm looking for Tony Barnhart.
I'm one of them.
Yeah,
which one you want?
I want the one that was involved in racing back in the day.
Well, that might be me then, I reckon.
Mr. Barnhart.
What can I do for you?
I got a film crew with me today, and I'm wondering if it'd be okay if they came inside with me and we talked for a minute.
Yes, sir, that'd be all right.
Great, thank you. I'm looking for that old pink Ford that Dale raced back in the early 70s.
You okay, too?
Yes, sir. Wondering if you know anything about it, if it ever came here.
Back about 71, somewhere along in there, Ray Oliver, he brought one from over at Ralph Earnhardt's that I think his son had drove, and it was cut up in pieces, and it was placed in the gully over there. I helped them put it in there, and it was Ray and a young man. The young man was somebody I know, but I can't remember who it was.
And is that car still here today?
Pieces of it's over in that gully, but it's been 40 years since it was put in there, and you know, leaves fall on it every year. And
I'd love to take a look if you wouldn't mind.
If you got boots or something you can put on, and don't mind getting down in there with the spiders and the snakes. And
let's do it. I'm ready.
Tony used to race himself back in the day, and for nearly half a century, he's let people dump cars on his property, he says, to stop the soil from eroding. There are hundreds, rusting, overgrown, and forgotten.
There's an old 40 truck there.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
40 coach down there, a tree fell on.
Wow. What do you got here?
Both of these are 40s, and that gray one's a 40, and that other one's a 47.
Wow.
See, that car there was Fireball Roberts' car.
Wow.
He was the Dale Earnhardt of his day. There it is.
Do you think this is it?
Around 1971, along in there, Ray bought this car out here, him and some young man. We rolled that car in that gully by hand. We had to flip it, keep flipping it. It brings back a lot of old memories to me. And
This is the K2? Not at all what I was expecting, especially since this car is blue, not pink.
Wow.
And, of course, it's been 40 years ago, so things are going to change in 40 years.
Do you know who painted it?
No, I don't know who painted the blue or when.
Did you ever hear it was painted over?
Yeah, I've been told it was painted over by a reliable source, and they told me that it was painted blue.
I mean, you know, looking at it, it's hard because, you know, I've never heard that it was painted over.
I think when David got it back from Dale, it might have been painted then, probably ran a couple more races, the reason it was painted blue or something.
David never told me the car was repainted or that his father junked it here. But if you look closely, there does appear to be pink paint under the blue.
It's definitely pink under there.
But is it possible Earnhardt's first car was here for over 40 years and almost nobody knew about it?
You believe that this was the pink K2 car?
I'm about 99% sure that that's parts of it.
And somebody painted it blue. You don't know if it was David or someone else?
Yeah, I don't know who done that. And Ray bought the car, I know for sure. And so I'm pretty sure that that's pieces of the K2 car. They don't want to talk about it. There's a big secret there.
Tell me why.
Huh?
You've been around here a long time, right?
I can't go into that, but you know, everybody has different ideas, and people just don't think alike. And but it is what it is, and that's what it is.
I understand. See, it's important to me to get sort of theories from people like you. You're in this community, you've lived here a long time. Why is there this mystery around it? Why are people so reluctant to tell me all the facts? Explain that to me.
I don't know. It's like when you're throwing out your trash, you don't go through it.
Did anybody ever tell you not to tell me or tell anyone that this is the K2 car?
Not that I can recall.
Tony is certain that this rusted piece of metal is the Man in Black's car, but he's the only one in town to say so. Did Kannapolis residents forget the K2's whereabouts or purposely conceal them? Or is this some other car, not Dale's, whose final resting place is Tony Barnhart's gully? At this point, I can only let the facts lead me.
You think I could take a piece of that paint, a paint chip?
If you want to, you can.
Would you mind?
I don't mind.
The pink is on there, it's not chipping off.
The only way to definitively tell if this could be Dale's first pink car is to have it forensically analyzed. So I'm bringing it to a paint specialist at John Jay College in New York City.
This is what the car looked like.
It was pink.
It was pink. Let me show you this sample that I was able to obtain. Of great interest is whether that pinkish color in there could possibly be that paint that was on that car.
First looking at it, I would think this might be just a basic primer on there.
A primer? If that's all this is, then this might not be Dale's K2 after all. Professor Reffner examines the paint to see if its makeup is consistent with that of primer.
It searched the library and it came up and it said it's montmorillonite. That's a clay. With that much clay, that's very typical of a primer.
Could it be that this is just a piece of some blue car that was painted first with a pinkish red primer? Or could Dale's Ford have been painted using a primer of red or white?
When the gentleman painted it, he told me he had some red and he put some white in and made a gallon. If the red or the white was actually a primer and they mixed those together, if that happened, it is still possible that that paint chip did come from this car.
I'd have to say yes to that.
The fact that this pink paint is most likely primer doesn't prove or disprove that this is the K2. But Reffner suggests he might be able to check to see if white paint was mixed in, which could make it consistent with the mixture the DeWalt brothers created.
Would it be okay if I left that sample with you, and would you be able to do those tests?
Yes.
How long do you think that'll take?
Week to 10 days, something like that.
Great. I thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
your time.
10 days later, Reffner emailed me with this information. The paint analyzed showed a distinct layer of titanium dioxide, also known as titanium white, which is material found in white paint. So the evidence strongly suggests that white paint was mixed with red primer to produce a pink color. It might not be definitive proof that I found Dale's pink K2, but it's as close as I think I'll ever get. Who would have thought that the very first car of the Intimidator, the man who revolutionized racing and changed the sport from a backwoods hobby to a billion-dollar industry, would be laid to rest in an abandoned gully? But though the pink K2 is neglected, left to rust away, it's no longer forgotten, and its legend, like Dale's, lives on.